So we have discussed dynamic NAT, and the opposite to dynamic NAT is static NAT. In static NAT, one internal IP address is always mapped to the same public IP address. A good example is when you have a web server on your private LAN and you wish that anyone that connects to your WAN interface, to your internet-facing interface, will always reach that web server. Now, if you have a pool of IP addresses, you can assign one IP address to that web server. In FortiGate, we call it virtual IP addressing, or VIP. Let's see how that works. Let's move over to our network interfaces and create that virtual IP. So we have a WAN and an internet facing port, which is at 84.228.69.234. That's our public IP. And we have a local area network at the 10.0.3.0 subnet. Now, we have a web server that is located on our local area network, and that web server is on the 10.0.3.22, as you can see in our drawing. We need any host that is entering through our WAN interface to reach our web server on port 80. So the next thing to do is to create a firewall address with our web server address. Let's name it web server 1. Let's create the range for that. Web server. We can use our LAN interface as the interface, and that's about it. Web server 1 is our address object that we will use later on our policy. Alright, there we have it. And now the second thing to do is to create the virtual IP. Let's create the mapping itself. So we'll create a virtual IP. Let's name it to server 1. Interface is our WAN interface. The external IP range or IP address is our WAN IP address. The mapped, the IP address that we will redirect packets is the 10.0.3.22, and we will use port forwarding to limit our port mapping only to port 80. Alright. So we have created the firewall address, we have created the virtual IP. The third thing is to create our policy. Now let's name our policy to server 1. The incoming interface is WAN, the outgoing is LAN, the source is just about anyone, our destination is web server 1, our service is all, but don't forget to disable NAT since we are already mapping it using virtual IP. And that's about it.